Welcome to the EQ Podcast. All right, welcome to the EQ Podcast, a show focused on equipping ministry leaders in the Calvary Chapel Association here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm your host, Zach Lamberson, and with me is Pastor Steve Winery. And we have on the show a very special guest today with us from Calvary Chapel Caldwell in Idaho, Pastor Bob Larson. How you doing, Bob?
Great. How you guys doing?
Really good.
Good.
So, Bob, I know, we know you. We've got to hang out with you the last few years at pastors' conferences and get to know your team a little bit. But would you, just because our listeners probably don't know who you are, just kind of introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us about who you are, where you're at, how you got there. And I call this the origin story portion of the podcast. I just like hearing people's story. I love hearing how unique God brought us to that place of salvation and also call into ministry and stuff. So please take some time.
Okay, well, I'm the pastor of Calvary Chapel Caldwell, and I moved here about 25 years ago. Didn't know anybody. And the reason that we moved here is that I was an assistant pastor at another church, another Calvary Chapel. And our daily routine at that church was you have to, when you get to your office, pray, seek the Lord, to listen, to hear the Lord's voice and what he would direct you to do, at work every day. And I felt like the Lord spoke to me and said, hey, I want you to go out and start a church. And so the first time I thought he said that to me, I just thought, well, I'm not writing that down, because I would write it. And I thought, I don't think so. And then, I would pray the next day and say, Lord, what do you want me to do? And I felt like the Holy Spirit said, the same thing I told you yesterday. I'm like, well, what was that? I don't know what that was.
I didn't write down. I forgot. How was I supposed to remember this?
So after a series of weeks, then I started praying, well, Lord, if you want me to do this, then you need to open the door. So you need to show me where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. I pray that the pastor that I'm working for will be excited about me leaving and going and starting a church. Because I knew I did a lot of things. I oversaw a lot of ministries and did a lot of work. And so I'm pretty sure he wasn't going to be happy about it. So, but long story short, then the Lord opened the doors and we're riding together in a car. And the pastor that I was working for, Pastor Rick Brown, he said, so Bob, what's the Lord been speaking to you? And I thought, well, this is an open door for me to tell him. So I said, well, I think the Lord's been speaking to me about, going and planting a church. And anyway, I had, kind of been praying, Lord, what do you want us to do? Where's there a place where there's not a Calvary Chapel, where nobody wants to go? I'll go there. And so Salt Lake, was kind of on my radar. I used to ski at Alta and Snowbird. And so I thought this would be a great place to live. And there's no Calvary Chapels in Salt Lake. I mean, I didn't know of very many. So my wife and I went, her best friend lived in Sandy, Utah, which is outside of Salt Lake. And we go there and we look up the Calvary Chapel and there's a great Calvary Chapel there. And so then I thought, well, maybe that's not it. So I just kept praying, Lord, what do you want me to do? And then we came out here to the Treasure Valley, Boise area. My sister lives out here. And, we kind of went around and there's a place where they have a nice golf course. And so I thought, we're going to go there. But then as we were here, the Lord told me.
Because of a golf course?
Yeah, I totally get that, Bob. That's something you look for, and you're going to plant yourself for a long term. You want to know what the golf courses are like around the area. Completely.
Well, it was Eagle, Idaho, and it's just a nice little place. And I actually could have worked at the golf course. They would have hired me, and I could have, it would have been nice. But then my sister told me, well, you certainly don't want to go to Caldwell. I mean, Nampa's fine, Eagle's fine, but not Caldwell. It's dangerous. Yeah. And so, then, but I felt the Lord telling me on my way home, we were driving back to our church where we were working. Hey, I want you to, move to Caldwell. And so I told my wife and she prayed about it and she said, yeah, I think the Lord's telling me the same thing. So, that was the beginning. And then we got here, it was difficult, but I did feel like the Lord wants me to do this. So we're going to do it. And, from the very first Sunday, I was always praying, Lord, if you want me to do something else, be a professional, musician or golfer or surfer or I'll do any of those things, whatever you want me to do. And so when things got hard, I would always think, Lord, you sure you don't want me to do something else? And but he didn't. He just said, no, I want you to stay here and do it. So so we moved here, didn't know anybody, had a Bible study in a house. And then we rented, there's a college here, College of Idaho. And we rented some rooms there and started Calvary Chapel Caldwell. And, I don't know how many people came, 10 people, pretty small. It was 25 years ago. And so we just kept, working away and praying for the Lord to provide a building. And then somebody came up to me. We were there about a year. Someone came up to me and said, hey, if you could find a building where someone would carry the paper and the down payment was around $20,000, then I'll give you $20,000 for down payment. And then that week, someone came up to me and said, hey, there's this building, and but you'd need $20,000 down to buy this building. The owner will carry the paper. And I said, oh, all right, well, let's go meet with him. So we bought that little building. I think it was about 5 or 10,000 square feet, maybe 10,000 square feet. I don't remember how big it was. So anyway, we moved into that building and started having church. We're there for a couple of years. And then we had an opportunity to move to another building, a Catholic church that they were building a new building. It was bigger. Then we went there for a couple of years. And then while we were there, a pastor from a church down the street came to my office and said, God told me to tell you that you're going to buy our church. And he gives me his business card. And, I'm thinking, this guy's weird. Anyway.
Yeah. I'm wondering if he goes to every church and says that, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just thought, it's an old building. I don't like old buildings. And so anyway, about a few weeks later, the Catholic diocese, which we were renting the Catholic church from, and it was a whole city block. So it was a pretty good building. They said, we're not going to rent you anymore. And I said, why not? And they said, well, it's not. Do you have you're going to use this building for something else? No, you're out. And so then I started praying, Lord, what should we do? And then the Lord said, well, remember that guy I sent to your office?
That you thought was weird?
Yeah. And so, so anyway, I call him and I still thought he was weird, but so then they told us how much money they wanted, and he ended up going to our church later. But so they told us how much money they wanted, and I thought, well, we can't afford that; it's too much money. And so at that time, it was a coincidence, not a coincidence, but the Lord had me go to this pastors' conference, and I talked to Don McClure, and I'd know Don McClure because one of my good friends worked for him, and so I knew him through that. So I said, hey, we were in this dilemma. We're getting kicked out. We have this building, but we're not sure about financing. He said, hey, call this guy I know. So I called the guy, and I don't know who the guy is. He's a banker in Southern California. And I call him, tell him our story, and he says, well, you need 20% down. And I said, yeah, we don't. Well, he said, how much money do you have? I said, well, not hardly any, a few thousand. And he said, we need 20% down. So you need, a lot of money. And I said, okay, well, thanks for helping. Goodbye. And he's like, whoa, what are you doing? He's like, well, we don't have the money. I mean, you can't loan us the money, right? And he said, well, what about asking, the people that you're buying the building from to give you $100,000 for the down payment? And I said, why wowould they give us money to buy their church? And he said, well, what do you got to lose? Why don't you do it? And so I thought, this is weird. And so, I said, I don't know. I don't think I want to do it. He said, well, what do you got to lose? So I said, all right. So then I go home and tell my wife. So this guy that I don't even know told me that I had to ask these other people that I don't know to give us $100,000 to buy their building. And my wife said, that sounds like a great idea. So,
oh my goodness.
So I asked them, and they came back a week later and said, yep, we had a board meeting and we'll do it. We'll give you the money.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's how we got in the building that we're in, is that, the Lord just kind of opened the doors, and it's been a great building. And this building is about 30,000 square feet. And now we're full. We've been looking for another building, but, it's expensive to buy a bigger building. And so, yeah, so that's kind of how we got here. It's kind of, totally the Lord doing everything. I didn't really know what I was doing. Didn't have a plan. Didn't have a steering committee. Didn't read Rick Warren's book about how to build a big church. We just prayed. That was it.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord. Hey, I got a question. So in the early days, when you first moved to Caldwell, you said you had about 10 people coming right at first. Where did they come from? How did, and this is for guys that are wanting to start a fellowship. So did you go out
Yeah, well,
witnessing? You meet them at work? What'd you do?
no, back then, 25 years ago, I didn't know anybody. So I knew a drummer that I played in a band with. And so I told him we were coming out, and he said, I'll come. And then he said, I know another family, and they came. And then I was a youth pastor a long time ago, and a couple uh, kids from the youth group that were grown up, they said, hey, we'll come. I mean, they weren't going to be part of the church. They just came to the first week. So I didn't know anybody, and I didn't invite anybody. Just, these 10 people came. Then when we went to the college, a couple weeks later, um, I still didn't know anybody, and I was working a full-time job, and I was just praying, Lord, if you want this to happen, then you bring people, and people just started coming, and yeah, mostly it wasn't me. I didn't invite them. I mean, I wanted to invite them, but I was working a full-time job, so I worked 40 hours a week at my job, and then I worked Saturday and Sunday at the church. So I was working 7 days a week, probably working, I don't know, 70, 80 hours a week. And yeah, I was tired.
Yeah.
That is so cool how God just sets things up for you, opens doors, and
Yeah.
it's because he's building the work. He's the one who's building it. Yeah.
And so you've been in your building now. You're saying you're kind of growing and looking to expand. I noticed you guys do 3 services. You do a Saturday night and then 2 Sunday morning. What made you think let's do a Saturday night and not 3 Sunday morning services like a lot of churches would do?
Well, I've been praying, Lord, how can we reach more people? And I go to as many pastors' conferences as I can and try to talk to other seasoned pastors who've had experience. And one of the pastors I talked to said, I love doing Saturday night because number one, it's an opportunity for all those people who work on Sunday to come to church. It's a whole different crowd. And then number two is that the pastor said that this is kind of a good, he said, even if not very many people come, it's a good way for me to run through my sermon and
Yeah.
kind of get the kinks worked out. And so I prayed about it for some time, and we did have quite a few people that told me they worked on Saturday night and couldn't come on Sunday. And so we prayed and stepped out in faith and said, let's give it a go. And we have prayed about doing 3 Sunday morning services now, and we probably could do another one, but we have kind of talked about, until we buy some land or have another building ready, if I do a Saturday night and 3 Sunday morning for a lot of years, then it's going to wear me out probably, because I'm not that tough. And it's hard on the children's ministry and the worship ministry. And so we would do 3 if we had a goal, like to get a building and then go back to 2. And now I've been doing Saturday night and 2 Sunday morning for, I don't know how long, maybe 10 or 15 years. And I love it. It really is great. It's just, the Saturday night group is a totally different group than the Sunday morning group. And it's really like another church. It's kind of like if you had a small church of 50 people on Sunday morning, and then you had a Saturday night church of 50 people, it's like a totally different church, because we have totally different ushers, totally different greeters. Just everybody's different. The children's ministry is different. The worship band is the same. They play Saturday and Sunday, but and so it really is just for me, it's just a great, and I've talked to other pastors that have tried it, and they said, Saturday didn't work, people didn't come, so we shut it down. We've had Saturday nights that were bigger than our Sunday morning. Yeah.
Praise God.
So I also noticed you do a TV program locally, and that was one of the things I was curious. Pastor Steve does one too. What kind of fruit have you seen from that? And then would you encourage other guys, who are maybe thinking they're getting to that point of growth where they're trying to look for other ministries, radio or TV? Would you encourage them like, hey, this is a great place to put money to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the television ministry for us is probably the most fruitful. I talk to people every Sunday who watch the service. I talk to people that say, I've been watching your service for 3 years, and then I came to church today. We talk to people that live pretty far away, like a 30, 40-minute drive, that are coming and that watch it. So it's a lot of work, but again, we prayed about it. Lord, if you want us to do this, open the doors. And he brought people, and it's a very powerful ministry. I've talked to some younger pastors who say, no one listens to radio, so we're only doing social media. And so my perspective is I want to reach as many people as we can for Jesus. So we do radio and TV and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and anything we can. I mean, we're not doing TikTok or Snapchat because it seems like that's not an appropriate place for a pastor.
I completely agree with you. And 15 seconds or whatever it is, a minute would not be enough. So, no, that's good. Have you had, I know you guys have like a large Mormon population in Idaho. We do too in Tri-Cities, but have you had a lot of Mormons respond? I know Pastor Steve has had Mormons who will listen to him before they go to Mormon church. And we've gotten some feedback like that, which is pretty neat.
Yes, we have, and we have a very diverse group of people coming from Presbyterians and Catholics and Mormons. But my dad was a Mormon and my grandma was a Mormon, so I have shared that in my services, in our church services, so people know that's my background. But we don't have one specific group. We're very eclectic. We have, just a wide, diverse group of people. Not that we're into diversity, but it's just how it happened.
Yeah. I also know, Bob, I just, from conversations I've had with you, you're a techie guy. You like tech, and you're involved with, the tech at your church. I was just thinking, for pastors, what's a piece of tech that you would think everyone should have this, or this would be really helpful to your ministry, something that you would go, this would be a really good tool for ministry for you? What's something that you could maybe share with us about?
Well, I would say the simplest thing is Facebook and YouTube. I mean, the simplest thing is to, somehow, record your services, the audio, put it on, put the audio on, wherever you can, a radio station or whatever. And then if you can just buy a cheap camera to record it. And there are very cheap ways to edit your sermon. We don't go live because I'm not politically correct. Our staff wants to go live. So we record it first service, and then our video editor edits it and then puts it on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, because we would probably be banned from YouTube. So, and Facebook. And yeah.
You should just try it. You should have the unedited let's get banned version of your services on a different YouTube account. And if they want to shut that one down, you still have your safe space, or you can...
We get shut down routinely.
Yeah, we do.
You do?
Yeah, they'll give us a strike on, and it's funny. It's on videos that are like a year or two old. They'll go through and say, "Yeah, you can't put that on." And it's I go through and listen to them to see if there's legitimate claims, and there's always not. It's something that Steve said that's like, "Hey, this is something that you want to pay attention to, or this is something that might happen," and they'll be like, "This is misinformation." So they've given us 2 different times, given us a strike on YouTube, which freezes your account for a week, and then you can't post anything that week, so no live services and whatnot, which is unfortunate. But they're also like, if you get another strike, we're going to take you off for a month, and then a 3rd strike, you're off. And so whatever.
Yeah. So we skip that. I tell our church, if you want to be offended, you have to come in person.
That's awesome.
I have our video editor. He comes down to me probably once every 6 months and gives me this look, the eyes, and says, "We can't use any of that."
So, Bob, if you're talking to a smaller church, what kind of, when you're talking about maybe doing getting on the local TV broadcast, or doing YouTube, or doing Facebook, what kind of equipment are they looking at? What would you tell them to start off with?
Yeah, well, there's a variety of very cheap, audio equipment. You get, if you have any kind of mixer that has an output, and you can, get a camera. Every church, no matter how small you are, 50 people, you can find some techie guy in the church. You can get a camera. We started out recording on a MacBook Pro, and I think we started out editing on what is Apple's
Final Cut.
No, that's what's the one that comes.
Oh yeah. I don't think they have they used to have one that was on your iPhone. I forget what it's called. I know what you're talking about. It's basically the GarageBand version of Logic.
Yeah, it's like GarageBand for video. and it was
Yep.
free, and we used that, and we just edited with that. And then things change so fast in the technology world, but you can also talk to consultants. Now there are audio consultants, and like in our community there's consultants you can have to come and, if you want to buy a new sound system, it kind of, everybody now does audio, video. So you could have someone come out and say, hey, give us a bid on, what we need to record for YouTube, Facebook, and for a TV station. I would suggest starting with Facebook and YouTube because it's so much easier. The easiest thing is you can buy a pretty inexpensive little mixer, and you can just stream directly live. As I said, we don't do that because we don't want to go through the hassle of being shut off every other week. So we edit it before we put it on. But a lot of churches have people in their church that could help them with it. And there's very inexpensive. You probably could buy a camera for less than $1,000. You can buy a really nice digital mixer for a couple $1,000. And you probably can get stuff for less than that. But I actually had someone come to me and show me they were a missionary overseas, and they were doing the whole thing with their iPhone. They were recording it with their iPhone, editing it with their iPhone, and you could probably find somebody to teach you how to upload it from your iPhone. But you could do really. They had 3 iPhones, and they were using some software. We originally started out after the MacBook Pro. Then we bought a Black Magic switcher, and I think it was pretty inexpensive, $1,000, a couple $1,000. And you just hook it up to a computer. You can record into it. The Black Magic stuff is inexpensive, and it's it works pretty good. We probably still have that switcher. If somebody wants it, we give it to them.
There you go.
There you go.
You just got to hit Bob up. Email Bob. I'll give you his email at the end of the show.
And his cell phone. And yeah.
We use a lot of Black Magic stuff too. There's good quality, and then like you said, the switchers are really intuitive, really easy to use. So I also noticed you play on your worship team. You're a musician. I was kind of thinking, what's the dynamic of, you're the shepherd, you're the leader of the church. When you're on the worship team, you're not leading, you're under someone. What's that dynamic like if you have, a pastor in a similar situation? How's that been for you?
I was a worship leader at multiple Calvary chapels before I was planted a church. And so I regularly got feedback from the senior pastor about what they wanted in the worship team. And I was blessed to be able to go to a lot of worship conferences, Calvary Chapel worship conferences, where I got to hear, Pastor Chuck Smith and Greg Laurie and Raul Reese talk to worship leaders about what was their expectations of a good worship leader. What should you do? And so for me, as playing in the band, I play electric guitar, and I usually don't lead any songs. I just, kind of play electric guitar. And so I just try to pass on that information that I learned as a worship leader, that, the pastors, and I was just telling one of our worship leaders this weekend, I think it was Greg Laurie. We were at his church, and it was a Calvary Chapel worship conference. And he said to the worship pastors, hey, we're ready to worship. We don't need you to work us out. We're ready. We love Jesus. We want to worship. Just get it going. Just don't do things that distract us, and don't sing weird songs that we don't know what it means. And so I just communicate that stuff, which is pretty simple,
Yeah.
And then I am very involved in the sound system. My son's an electrical engineer, and he's our sound technician. And I, because I was a worship leader and I did outreach concerts, so I know guys who do that kind of stuff. So I'm involved in that a little bit, and we try to make sure with our sound guy, we have a sound pressure level meter with a big meter. It's I don't know how big it is. It's huge, and that, hey, we don't want to be driving people away because it's too loud. So at our sound booth, I think we tell them 95 dB A weighted. Don't want to have it too loud. And then I asked the sound guys to go out in the audience and to talk to some old people and young people and say, how does it sound? And if the old people and the young people both say good, you're in business. But if one of them says it's too loud, then you need to, consider, is it too loud? Because, that's kind of been a thing for our church. Because we have, full band with drums and guitars and multiple guitars and lots of singers and, a nice PA that sounds good. And so it's easy to get too loud. So that's a big deal, is not being too loud. And then our goal in the worship ministry is we want to be raising up young people. So right now we have, I don't know, 3 or 4 young girls that are in high school still singing on the worship team. And we rotate different worship teams on, different weekends. And so we want to be getting young people involved, giving them opportunity. So we're always wanting to, get young people involved. And then we also want to have a little mix of new and old. We want to have, some hymns. And I tell them our ideal worship set, we do 5 songs at a church service, is to maybe have one hymn of the top 10 that everybody knows. And then, a new song that is biblical and has biblical truth, not a new song that I don't know what it means. And which, I mean, I studied the Bible, for a long time, and I studied every week and read it through, I don't even know how many times. And there are worship songs I honestly don't know what they're about. I don't even know what they're talking about. So we try to avoid that. But
usually it's water, Bob.
Yeah, there's a lot of songs.
Usually it's water.
Oh,
talk a lot about water.
There's a lot of water going on.
A lot of water. So we tell them ideally, hey, if you could have a hymn, because there's a diverse group in our church, and then if you could have a new song, and then a couple songs that everybody knows that are kind of, and so we kind of have a systematic approach to songs we do and how we do them. We have guest people come in to do songs, do worship, and probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, we were having a couple different guest worship leaders come regularly. And so they would ask me, well, how do we know that we're not playing the same songs you played last weekend? So I said, hey, how about you just send me 10 songs and I'll pick 5 and give them back to you, and you do those 5. And so probably 10 or 15 years ago, we started doing that. And now I do that with, when we have guest worship leaders, or even when we have worship leaders that don't go to our church but come regularly. And that really is great, because then we have a diverse mix. We always have them play different songs than what our house band plays. So I think worship is a big part of reaching the lost. I think when the music sounds like it's from 10 generations ago, then people feel a little awkward about inviting their non-Christian friends who went to the bar last night and was listening to who knows what pagan music at the bar. And then they come and hear some music that sounds like it's from 200 years ago. I mean, I think that's a big deal. And as a young person, for me, I didn't go to church growing up. I was an atheist. I sold drugs in California. And then when I got saved, I started going to this Calvary Chapel, and it was in Idaho, and the worship was good, but it wasn't what I was used to. But there was a lot about Jesus in it, and it seemed like they were singing to God, and it seemed like they were sincerely singing to God, even though I didn't know what that meant. And so for me, worship's important, because I think that when it's right, and people know when it's right, then people just sense, oh, this is right. This is what we should be doing. And then people love it, and they want to be involved with it. And even for me, our worship band was kind of country-ish. And I would be in my car listening to Ozzy Osbourne and Van Halen. Then I would come in and hear Buck Owens or whatever the worship leader was playing. I didn't know what it was, and we were clapping our hands. But in my mind, I could tell they love Jesus, and I want to love Jesus, and we're singing to Jesus. And so even though I knew nothing about it, whereas sometimes, even with Calvary Chapels, we're on vacation, we come to a church, and here I am, a pastor who studies the Bible and teaches, 4 or 5 Bible studies every week and read through the Bible hundreds of times. And they're singing a song, and I'm thinking, I have no idea what this song is about. Yeah. And then that doesn't seem like, oh, we're worshiping Jesus. It's like, what are we doing? So I encourage our worship ministry. Let's keep it simple, focus on the Lord. The songs need to be biblical. Yeah. So.
Hey, Bob, talk to the guys who are having a struggle with worship leaders, like they don't have one, or they have one that they can play 3 chords and that kind of starting out.
Yeah. Well, my advice would be keep it simple. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. So our church plays with tracks and Ableton and Pro Tools all at the same time. And when we started out, though, we just had an acoustic guitar, and that was it. And, we have people at our church that can lead worship with acoustic guitar, and hundreds of people, and it works because they're just doing what they do. Don't try to be something you're not. And then, if you only know 3 songs, only play 3 songs. Don't play 4. Don't play a song that you don't know. Just do what you can do. and don't go past that. So, and I think that's important. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Just do what you can do and pray the Lord brings people. And then even lessons are important. Like I encourage our church, hey, you should have your kids taking music lessons, and we should be raising up generations of worship leaders. And so in my own family, I taught my kids how to play drums, guitar, bass, keyboards. All my kids were musicians. And my son, who's 30, he still plays drums at our church. And he's really good. He's been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, awesome.
But I would encourage people to take lessons. I mean, sometimes people think that musicians are born that way, that they're just born skilled. The truth is, the best musicians I've ever met in my life are people who are naturally gifted by God, and then they work on that skill and hone that skill and learn from other people.
Yeah. One of the things that I didn't realize was going on, I grew up in Greg Laurie's church. And so, the worship leaders would come through. And so you'd have a guy who's there for 2 years, and then the guy's gone, and something else is going on. But one of the things that Greg did was he routinely got up and led worship a cappella. And I was, I was like you. I came out of a non-Christian background, knew nothing about Christianity. And so I just thought it was normal. And he would be standing up there, and he's clapping, and he's singing, and leading the whole congregation in worship. And so, worship is worship, and if you've got the talent to play the guitar and do a few songs and that kind of thing, then you could do that, but you can always do it a cappella.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. I did that too early on, but I would just sing songs a cappella when we didn't have a worship leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Bob, I know you're kind of a unique teacher in the Calvary movement, not bad. I like how you teach. It's just a little different than some of the typical Calvary guys. Would you kind of explain maybe your approach to teaching? I know you're a little bit shorter on the shorter end. Where you told me about a half hour, 35 minutes is what you like to teach. And I don't know if it's your short attention span or, no, that's about my jam too. Yes. I think it's my own short attention span is why I don't like to go much past that, but.
So my wife is a school teacher, and I went to conferences with her when she was teaching. She's an English teacher, high school. She taught speech. And so I went to a conference with her, and they had this PhD telling how when teachers teach that the average American attention span is about 30 minutes. And when you go to 40 or 50, they're not going to remember the other stuff anyway. And so I remember I was a youth pastor when I heard that. And so I would start asking the adults in our sanctuary. Our pastor would teach an hour and sometimes an hour and a half. And I would stand at the front door, and, I was in my 20s. I didn't care what people thought. I said, hey, so what was the sermon about? What did you learn? And I had a good memory back then. And I found that people couldn't remember what he said. And so then when I was an assistant pastor, I would do the same with our youth pastor. I would stand at the door, and when the kids came out, I would say, so what was the sermon about? What was the message about? Tell me one thing that you learned. And people couldn't remember very much. So, that just kind of stuck in my mind. And then I remember going to Calvary Costa Mesa and watching Pastor Chuck. And, it was very structured, started on time. And I don't know exactly, what their thought was, but it was 1 hour because he did 3 Sunday mornings, right? And it was, 20 minutes of worship, 5 minutes of announcements, and then, 40 minutes of, or 35 to 40 minutes of teaching. And so I normally do about 40 minutes. The editors cut about 10 minutes for the TV show or more. Well, our TV show is 25 minutes. I usually go about 35, sometimes 40. So 35 regular. So they cut 10. And then how we do it is that, I just kind of looked at Pastor Chuck's model that Pastor Chuck taught on Sunday night, verse by verse. So we do that on Wednesday night. I go verse by verse, book by book through the Bible. And then on the weekend, whatever we're teaching on Wednesday night, verse by verse, we take a section and dig into that little section. And Pastor Chuck, I heard him saying all the time, we don't teach topical at Calvary Chapel. We teach in-depth expositional, but people don't know what that means. So on Sunday morning, we take a section, dig in. And so I teach about 40 minutes on Wednesday night. And I find if I do a chapter or two, I talk pretty fast. Same at our church, even at 30 or 40 minutes, they can't retain very, and I use PowerPoint. I usually have about 20 to 25 supporting verses in that 30-minute message. And then I'm reading a whole chapter. or two. And, the average American can't take that much. I mean, if I went for an hour, I'm thinking a lot of people wouldn't remember very much of anything because I talk fast. So that's kind of my goal was to kind of model what Pastor Chuck did, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, try to do a chapter every week on Wednesday night, and then a couple verses on the weekend, dig into it. And so from my perspective, that was kind of what I saw Pastor Chuck do, although I know he did the 2-hour services back in the 70s and 80s. And I went to Calvary Chapel when we first started here 25 years ago, and their service was 2 hours, hour and 45. And I remember just thinking, wow, that's so long. And, I love the Lord, but I just try to be practical and realistic. People can only take so much. And I suppose that a pastor who teaches for 2 hours then attracts people that can, take in that much.
Retain,
but,
yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my thought about it. And then when you have multiple services on Sunday morning, 1 hour is great. So you have time, because if we do 3 on Sunday morning, which we probably will when we, get ready to move to the next building, more than that's just not, not practical.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Again, I just like different perspectives. I know some guys we're going to teach for an hour. We've kind of adjusted. We've gone down a little bit for COVID. We started shortening services a little bit, and now we're doing 3 services. Same thing. We're trying to keep things a little bit more manageable. And then we have times, during the week where, actually, if we do like Steve's taught Bible college classes for us, and he'll teach for 3 hours. And so those are your students taking notes, trying to pay attention.
Yes.
Yeah. I get to the end of teaching for 3 hours at the Bible college and my head hurts. Like I'm physically, can't think straight. All right. Here's our lightning round. Okay. You ready for these questions?
Yes.
Okay. So a good pastor you like to listen to, dead or alive?
I love to listen to Joe Focht. I mean, he's probably my favorite guy to listen to now. And it's changed over the years. When I first started teaching Bible study, it was John Corson. I loved his stories and and he did the same thing as Pastor Chuck. He taught verse by verse on Sunday, and then in depth on Sunday night, verse by verse, in depth on Sunday morning. And so I love John Corson. I liked Bob Coy for a while. But I never could reproduce what he was doing. So, but now I love listening to Joe Focht. I read all the Wiersbe stuff. I have all the, I love reading Wiersbe for a while, and then all the Ironside stuff. And then, I bought all the books that Pastor Chuck said to buy. I have the, recommended reading list from Pastor Chuck. So I read all those. I own all those. And so I just try to read a new commentary every time I go through. Depending on, what we're doing. If I'm teaching the book of Revelation, then, there's guys that are better at the book of Revelation. So I might even get some non-Calvary guys who have some great insight. I used to listen to Chuck Missler when I was teaching the book of Revelation. And Joe Focht is probably my favorite right now.
All right. So that kind of leads me into my second.
Wait a second. But that was like 5 guys
that
and
was
then all the commentaries on the planet.
I maybe should have emphasized lightning a little bit more.
Sorry.
This leads to my second question is, what's a good read, a good book recently you've read that you think would be good for pastors? Just one, though, not 6.
Fun. Yeah. Well, we just went through with our leadership team. It's called, it just slipped out of my mind. Disciplines. It slipped out of my mind. Anyway, it's a guy from, slipping out of my mind. Well, I was thinking
love putting guys on the spot.
I'm trying to cut it down. Well, the Oswald Sanders, I think that's his name, Sanders. It's called Spiritual Disciplines?
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
It's on a shelf somewhere here.
Yeah, I always I can look at my library and see him. I don't have him in front of me. Yeah, we just did Spiritual Disciplines. I think it's by Wilkerson. He was a navigators guy. Mm-hmm. And so that's a great one. Yeah, one is just hard. So, so that's a good leadership one. We also did Dr. Daniel Amen, Be Happy during COVID, because it's about your brain type and how it works. Yeah.
I'm having a hoot, Bob. Yeah, this is really good. All right, I'm going to narrow it down to one again. One piece of advice you give to someone who's in full-time ministry or wanting to be in full-time ministry. What's something that you've just learned from the Lord?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing is to be led by the Lord. So meaning that you pray, you hear God's voice, and then you venture out in faith. And not to do things that you just get an idea to do. And in my mind, that's a big difference, that when you pray, Lord, what should we do? And then the Lord tells you, and then you do it. Especially when you're starting a church, because if the Lord tells you to do it, then you can do it with all your heart, even though the outward circumstance look like it's not working and things are not happening and all my work is not fruitful. But if the Lord told you to do it, then you do it, and it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks.
I love it. Thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate your time. Thanks for hanging out with us.
That's all the questions we get?
That's all we get. No, we'll have some more. We'll have you back on, and we'll dive into some other topics at some point. But thanks so much for coming on, man.
All right. Thanks for inviting me. God bless you guys.
You too.
The EQ Podcast is here as a resource for our listeners. Check us out at eqministry.com. On our website, you'll find a variety of helpful tools, including past ministry conferences and a contact form to seek out help or counsel from seasoned Calvary pastors who want to encourage you in your serving or answer your ministry-related questions. Until next time, God bless.